2, 3, 4. Let me tell you about PuckPedia, stats, contracts, and caps. It's all there for you. One-stop shop for your hockey information. It's a hockey sensation. So log on, log on, log on. If you give a puck, go to PuckPedia.com.
Welcome to episode 4 of the PuckPedia Hockey Show. Today we welcome on Ian Pulver, NHLPA certified agent and founder of the Will Sports Group. The Will Sports Group currently has 2 agents that have over 42 active contracts in the NHL, totaling over $436 million. On the episode today, Ian talks about how busy his time is in the months of June and July as the NHL draft and free agency period open up. Then we also talk about one of his biggest clients, Keandre Miller, signed a massive deal with the Carolina Hurricanes for 8 years and $60 million in a sign and trade with the New York Rangers. So we discuss how all the logistics played out behind that deal. And then we also talk about a fun story he had when he helped negotiate in 2007 Scott Gomez's deal when he was going from the New Jersey Devils to the New York Rangers across the Hudson River, and what it was like to negotiate with the legendary Lou Lamoriello. We also talk about the state tax discourse that has been widely taken over in the media, and we get an NHL agent's perspective on if he thinks it's a true benefit or if it's more media driven. Then we wrap up the episode talking about advice he has for someone who wants to become an NHL agent today. Without further ado, let's drop the puck. We now welcome on Ian Pulver to the PuckPedia Hockey Show. Ian, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Of course, we're glad that you could find some time in these busy moments here, but let's kind of dive right into this. So it's the month of July right now. We're a week after the free agency period open. I'm curious from like an agent's perspective, what the month of June and July is like. You have the Stanley Cup Finals going on where you have clients involved in those games, but then also the NHL draft coming up and then free agency right after. Busy time in an agent's world, I imagine.
It's the busiest time of year to get the business done. Really, I said to my wife the other day, you lose track of the day of the week, the calendar, everything. From June all the way up until as we speak, there's business going on, and it's fun, it's exciting, it's exhilarating. Years ago, Jim Gregory, a long time executive for the NHL, in the early 90s, when I first met him, he said to me, "Hey, Ian, welcome to the no home league. That's the NHL." And so there's always something going on, and especially on the team side. I mean, they never stop. It's 24/7, 365 for the most part. There's some downtime in August, but it's in today's day and age, it never stops.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jim Gregory, too, obviously a key executive as they've named a General Manager of the Year award after him. I'd love to talk about this year's NHL draft, too, because it was decentralized. So most of the executives were stationed in their home bases. They were not all in Los Angeles for the draft. I'm curious from the agent side of things, was it harder to conduct business because all the executives were kind of spread out? I feel like usually it's a time when everyone's together. There's a lot of, you're running into people, you're talking, you're able to make conversation, and it just makes things easier. So I'm curious what your thoughts were on this year's decentralized draft, and if you think they'll go back to it next year or if they're going to kind of continue it this way.
My first draft, believe it or not, was in 1990. And I've been in and out of drafts for 35 years. And this year probably was the most surreal. I mean, it was really like, is it happening? Is it not happening? Where are the 32 teams sitting on the floor? Where are the executives? Where are the former players that are working for teams that I used to work for at the NHLPA? Coming out of Vegas, where we had 4 first-round picks, Sennecke and Luchenko, Danford, and Boisvert. The Sphere draft was unbelievable. And to go into the Peacock Theater in Los Angeles, great venue, great sound, but it was missing something, and it was unfortunate because that draft over the years had served to be a convention of sorts for everyone in the hockey industry. And so my theory is, or philosophy now is, either go all in or go all out. In between, I think the players enjoyed it, the families enjoyed it, but they didn't know any different because it was their first draft. So it was exciting, but at the same time was missing something. And like I said, I going forward, they should go all in or all out.
Yeah, so we know that the NHL free agency period is a very busy time for agents, but I'm curious how busy it is in the month of June, specifically leading up to the NHL draft.
Yeah, actually, it's really busy. I mean, from the combine, the draft is the culmination of it's only a day in time, but it's a bit of a culmination of the buildup of our recruiting. And with my consultants, John Walters and Brett Valakat and Jonathan LaChance and our Finnish partners, in Finland, really, it's the build up and the end of our recruiting, and then it becomes the beginning of getting players ready to be pros down the road. But they work the phones, they're in touch with area scouts, they have to have a pulse on what teams think of our players, and they do a great job on the phones. And really, we don't know for sure where the players are going, but it's our job to try and find out the range of where our players are going in the draft, and highlight their strengths, talk about their weakness. It's an information gathering month, big time when it comes to the draft, and our guys do a great job doing that.
You did mention one thing that I wanted to talk about here. So Beckett Sennecke was drafted 3rd overall by the Anaheim Ducks. Were you as surprised as he was in the audience when he got drafted by the Ducks? Just, hearing from all the pre-draft interviews and everything like that as on the agent side of things.
Not really. I mean, I was not. I didn't know it was 100% sure, but I knew that it was a real likelihood that Anaheim was very, very interested in it. They never completely tipped their caps or hats to tell you 100% because, some say in hockey, what's true today may not be tomorrow. So, having said that, I feel it's the agent's job to, help the players or put the players in positions so that they can get the most out of all situations, including the draft. So the excitement for the family was second to none. And so, even though I knew there was a strong likelihood, I wanted the absolute shock and awe for the family and the joy. And that was a real life moment. And I think it'll be played over and over again for years to come. And some others may practice to let the families know, but I like to have them experience the ultimate experience, and it doesn't get better than that.
It really doesn't. And they even brought it up again this year in the draft. They're going to bring it up when he makes his NHL debut, when he turns into a nice NHL career. It's going to keep coming back to that moment when he was drafted, which is just awesome for the kid and awesome for the family and everyone involved.
Yeah, it was spectacular.
Before we kind of get into this year's free agency and just kind of some of the business you were able to conduct, I did want to talk about, so Ian's been an agent in the NHL for over a decade now at this point in his career, and he's represented some of the high-end players like Olli Jokinen, but I did want to bring up a Scott Gomez. So in 2007, Scott Gomez signed a big free agency contract with the Hudson River rival New York Rangers from the New Jersey Devils. He signed for a 7-year, $51.5 million deal. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what it was like to negotiate with Lou Lamoriello. You've had a lot of experience with him on the NHLPA side when you were overworking on that side of things, but then also what it was like kind of navigating that with Scott, kind of going to a division rival, a big rival of his. And then also just, as someone who grew up a Devils fan and a season ticket holder, and Scott Gomez was cutting my meat as a Devils season ticket holder at dinner when I was 4 years old. I'm interested what that was all for the agency side of things, and just for Scott in general as he's embarks his new journey now as a head coach of the Chicago Steel.
Yeah, well, he's a brilliant hockey mind, and Scott's going to do great. He was a coach out in BC in the BC Junior Hockey League, and now he's with the Steel. And I'm really excited to see what he can do with Mike Matto, two former Devils, and two up, and they still keep in touch with Lou, and that's how wide Lou's tentacles kind of reach. And Lou's all about business, but he doesn't never lost touch with the personal touch with Scott and all of his other players for the most part. And that was the beauty of Lou. He was he's iconic. He's mysterious. He's iconic. And he's withstood the test of time by adapting and changing and surviving in a legendary way. So it's interesting that Scott and Lou still are in touch with each other, which is a special thing. But, when Scott had left the Devils, he had a great run in New Jersey, and we couldn't strike an agreement based on his market value at the time. And he was a really sought after unrestricted free agent in the league, my recall. And, it's been more than a decade. It's almost been 20 years now that I've been an agent on top of my experience at the NHLPA. And back in the day, 2007, I believe at the time, he was one of the most sought after free agents, along with Chris Drury. Drury came and signed the same day as Gomez, but leaving the Devils was not easy for Scott. He grew up a New Jersey Devil. He was the Rookie of the Year. I believe he won 2 Stanley Cups. So crossing the Hudson was monumental, and a little bit of shock and awe at the time. And but he, like I said before, my recall, the Rangers, the Kings, the Flyers, all were in on Scott Gomez, and it was a great result for Scott. He enjoyed his time in New York and then on to Montreal. I believe he didn't get back to the Stanley Cup Finals, but did have some playoff success in both Montreal and New York.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, 2-time Stanley Cup champion, 2000 and 2003. Also won the Calder as the NHL's Rookie of the Year before, like you mentioned, crossing the Hudson River. So great career for Scott. We'll see how he does in Chicago with the Steel
he's a brilliant mind. I'm really excited. I'm hoping that he has great success in the USHL. Another player you mentioned, Olli Jokinen, a former player of mine, is a coach back in Helsinki. He went back to Finland, but another great hockey mind that one day, in my mind, will be a head coach in the NHL. Just another player that learned and studied and played for a lot of great coaches. And Olli has a bright future as a coach too.
Definitely. I've heard, some rumblings in the next couple of years, he'll be a top candidate maybe to come over here in the NHL or AHL, wherever he decides to go to coach in this league. But again, like you mentioned, just top hockey minds. Now let's dive into this year's free agency, right? There's a lot of action. At first, we didn't think there was going to be too much, but your biggest deal with the client you represented is K'Andre Miller. So kind of a deal that shocked the industry a little bit. So K'Andre Miller signed an 8-year, $60 million deal with the Carolina Hurricanes, $7.5 million AAV. He had to execute a sign and trade with the New York Rangers to get that 8th year. I'm curious from your side of things how that whole situation shakes out, because there's a lot of moving parts. First off, the Rangers and the Hurricanes have to agree to parameters for a trade. Then you have to negotiate with the Carolina Hurricanes to get a deal done. So as much as you're comfortable talking about, I'd love to hear your perspective on the whole situation and how K'Andre Miller received a life-changing generational contract with the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah, I mean, it's gosh, to play it back, I mean, it turned into a bit of a whirlwind. Having said that, it became more and more clear that the Rangers were kind of going through an overhaul in the last 2 years, to some degree, starting with my current client, but former Ranger, Barclay Goodrow, and then Jacob Trouba, and then Chris Kreider, Ryan Lindgren. Chris Drury, who was completely above board the whole time and with the Miller situation and very professional. was in communication with me, was unsure whether he wanted to do a long-term deal. And so one thing led to another, and Miller's contract was up. And at 7:00 the night before July 1, unrestricted free agency, Group 2 free agents are able to speak to some teams about possibilities. There were several teams that reached out, and as the night went into the morning and the morning turned to noontime, it was clear that Drury, who acquired Gavrikov from the Los Angeles Kings, or was trying to acquire him but did not, I should say, ended up, signing him to a long-term deal, another left shot D-man, and it became clear that Miller would either be a short-term Ranger or sign or elicit an offer sheet somewhere else. One thing led to another. The Hurricanes stepped to the plate, expressed interest, and then they had to construct a deal with the Rangers, which got done. In the meantime, discussions are going on with the Hurricanes to discuss parameters of a contract, and one thing led to another, and Keandre Miller is now a Carolina Hurricane.
Yeah, it's fascinating too when you have all that different kind of information and just how that situation played out. I would like to get your general thoughts too on free agency. Another one of your clients still has some business to take care of, as Marco Rossi is currently also a restricted free agent. But then also with the Keandre situation, you saw some other deals with restricted free agents get signed, such as Evan Bouchard signed a 4 times $10.5 million deal. Noah Dobson signed a long-term deal with the Montreal Canadiens in a similar sign and trade fashion. So I'm curious, just general thoughts on free agency with the rising salary cap and also with some teams having a lot of cap space. Just love to get your thoughts on that.
There are teams with cap space that are sitting on cap space that may not spend it. They may be waiting in the weeds for trades during the year, or later on this summer. The Bouchard Dobson scenarios clearly reset values to help Miller. It's interesting to study and watch the Byram situation in Buffalo, where Buffalo opted to take him to arbitration. Fascinating to watch too. The marketplace with the rising cap, everybody's feeling it out. And so there are still quite a few unrestricted free agents that are still not signed, but it's tough out there because teams have young prospects coming in. Teams want to give their prospects who have maybe been in the AHL for a couple of years. It's almost like too much supply, not enough demand for a certain level of player. It's going to become harder and harder to sustain longer careers for players who aren't necessarily impact players. I think we're going to see a lot of churn. I see better kids coming out of junior, better kids coming out of college. Will press or push out some players that haven't hit it in the NHL. I'm worried about that. And then lastly, we're looking finally starting to see levels of contracts, exceed where the contracts were in 2004. And, that's when I was at the PA, and that's why there was a lockout. And so, Joe Sakic was offer sheeted in the 90s. I think there's a great little thing on Netflix.
In ESPN, 30 for 30, I believe.
Yeah, 30 for 30. Everybody should see that. But, back in the Sakic, Forsberg, Korea, those guys were making, Sakic, I think one year made $17 million off of an offer sheet scenario. I'll never forget that. We were at the NHLPA at the time. But slowly with the rising cap 20 years later, I'm hoping we see a $20 million salary for Connor McDavid a year from now. We need that. The players need it. It's reflective of the business. The cap and the cap going up is great, but I have to scratch my head and say, where was all the money? Why is it going up all of a sudden? I know we came out of COVID, but for it to jump up, it gives me cause it makes me pause to wonder. But hopefully the NHL and the NHLPA struck a new collective agreement that will serve to be great for the players and the teams, and this business can continue to grow and expand revenues, and the fans will get great product. That's all we can hope for.
That's all we can hope for. And you bring up a good point, too. I think it was like Jaromir Jagr maybe in like 2000, 2001 was making around $15 million, which was about the same as the top MLB, NFL, NBA contracts. And in the last 20 years, those have just risen to such an exponential level that these have not in the NHL, to the point where role players in the NBA are making Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl money. So to your point, it is hopeful that Connor McDavid takes a max deal, but at the same time, with the hard salary cap, sometimes the players are inclined to take less to kind of let their teams build around them. So it's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah, rising tides raise all ships. So to me, like, the top dogs need to hit the top rung, and then the job of the league and the Players Association is to grow the business so that the dollars keep going up, and players and teams alike do great. I mean, franchise values under this collective agreement and previous collective agreements have risen, off the charts, and so should player salaries.
Yep, I totally agree. If the players get paid, it's just good for everyone. It's good for
Everyone.
the business. And hopefully we continue to see those trends as the rising salary cap will kind of get there in the next few years.
For
One
sure.
last thing I did want to talk about too is this whole state tax discourse that seemed to taken over the media and conversations lately. One of your clients, Carter Verhaeghe, signed a big extension with the Florida Panthers at the beginning of last season, 8 years, $56 million. The first year of that deal kicks in this year. I'm curious to just get your whole thoughts on the state tax discourse. Is it more that the media is now making a big thing of it because it's existed for the last 10, 20, 30 years? But is it a product of some of these teams like Florida and Tampa and Vegas winning recently, and they've actually just built good teams around them? Or is it really a true benefit for these teams to have that state tax discount?
It's really everything. I mean, there's not just one thing. I mean, they've done a hell of a job in the new markets of Nashville, Vegas, two locales, no state tax. Seattle hopefully come that way. And then, the management of these teams have built great teams, coupled with players wanting to play in no state tax situations. It's certainly a lure. It's attractive, and it's definitely on the top of everybody's minds. Climate, organization, first class, great buildings, great fans, and no state tax. And so it all adds up. And they could prove to be a juggernaut. I don't subscribe at all to punishing those teams. I mean, no one wanted to play in Tampa. No one wanted to play in Florida in the 90s, or I shouldn't say no one, but, they struggled. Their organizations, maybe didn't have the right management. Say what you want. But now they're full steam engines rolling down the track. And I think it's great. And it makes everything competitive. And, the blueprint for hockey in the States is supported by that. And maybe we'll see a team in Houston, another team in a no state tax situation. And, that's great. So long as they put another team in Toronto, I'll be happy.
Yeah, we'll see how the NHL expands. There are some rumors that they are going to go to 34 teams in the near future. So we'll see if that is beneficial for the league or maybe if it dilutes the product a little bit, adding all these more teams. We'll see how that plays out. But one more final question. And Ian, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. This final question is presented by CoolBet. Stay cool, bet responsibly. If you go to puckpedia.com/coolbet, you can get in on the action today. So we like to just end this episode with just like a final question for our guests. We'd love to hear if you have any advice you would have for someone who wants to become, a certified NHL agent. You do have experience also working on the legal side with the NHL Players Association before you became a full-time agent, and maybe just touch on anything that you can kind of give to some aspiring agents in that space.
Get out in the hockey world and get involved at a young age. Just don't wake up and say you want to be an agent and negotiate contracts, because that's just one small piece of it. Understanding the game, being involved in the game, and most importantly, understanding how players think, how players play, what the players all the pressures that attach to be a player, the sociological impact, and the psychological impact and the human behavioral parts of the game for being an agent are as critical as having an MBA or a law degree. And so, get out and coach. And, if you love the game, get out and be part of grassroots hockey. Understand how families are, understand how players tick, understand what coaches are like. Understanding it's a wonderful profession. It's a wonderful way to make a living. But just don't think it's the negotiation of the contract. Absolutely critical piece, because at the end of the day, that's how the players get paid. You need to know the business side of things, but that whole component parts of making up, of being an agent, and understanding how players tick, what they need. It's all about the players. The whole industry, if there's no hockey, there's no revenues, there's no owners if you don't have the players. And the players are first and foremost always, and everybody works for the players, is what I've always said. The owners are great too. They pay the players, but there ain't no game if there are no players.
No, and I love that you said that. The players are what drives this business. They're what makes this product so great. And we have good people like Ian representing those players to make sure they get every opportunity and maximize every dollar they earn, because they definitely deserve it. Well, thank you, Ian, so much. Ian from the Will Sports Group. If you go to puckpedia.com, you can go to Ian's agent page. It'll show he currently has 31 active contracts in the NHL today with those clients, and more to kind of get signed as restricted free agency and free agency wraps up here in the next month or so. But Ian, thank you so much for the time. And any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, just have another great hockey day.
Great. Have another great hockey day. I love that. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a good one.
PuckPedia.com.